Hello, welcome to another vlog. Um, as you know, my channel sometimes does book wrap-ups, and I thought it's about time for us to talk about books again. It's been a while since I talked about books, so today's wrap-up is gonna touch up April to May books, really. Um, Here we go. There's quite a few to talk about, so let's start. April's book of the month was Brandon Sanderson, Final Empire. We read it for my Patreon. I have bought entire trilogy as well. I never read Mistborn trilogy, and I had a big hype for it. So it basically is a high fantasy set in a world where magic system evolves around ingesting metals, and different metal has different powers. And by the way, at the end we had references of what does what and so on. So we see this character, I forgot her name. We see this girl. Oh my god, it was very. Anyway, so we see this character who is basically said to be a allomancer, which means could be she's type of allomancer, I believe, who could use all sorts of metals and so on. Anyway, I wanted to say that we see her development, discovering powers and ingesting metals. Entirely, this book is set as a heist, and basically we also see gathering of a team. I personally said there was so much hype that I think it wasn't met because I was expecting a bit more engaging writing style, let's say. And heist is generally not my genre, and I didn't get into it, and I wasn't continuing with the series. Now, I still really love Brandon Sanderson, how he explains things, how he comes with ideas. I love his lessons. But this is what was introduction for me into Brandon Sanderson. And I just feel like for this time where I am currently, it didn't fit in. I think because it's actually an older book, it might have landed better with me in the past than it did land now. But here we are. So that's for that. Next one I had as an audiobook was called Daisy Jones and the Six. It's by a writer who wrote Six Husbands, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And basically, if you remember Evelyn Hugo, it was an interview for biography. So this one is basically an interview for some sort of memoir as well, I'm sure. I don't want to say too much, so I'll just say that every single member of a band from 70s are revealing their story. So there's a lot of like ambition to break into music. There's a lot of like wildlife, drugs, and so on. And if you're not very, happy with some musical drama and creative drama around and drugs and so on, I would say you can skip it, but it's actually beautifully written. I mostly liked it because Daisy Jones, same as Evelyn Hugo, was very strong personality. And I think she was, for me, she was very strong personality creative-wise. She wanted to be her own creator, her own self. And I really resonated with that self, like self sort of part. The only other thing is that I realized watching series later after reading the book that we didn't quite use the songs as they were written in text. So they used completely different songs. I don't know if that's some sort of copyright issue or anything, but wordings to songs were different, so we did vibe a little different to me. Anyhow, I really enjoyed it, and I just wanted to say I really enjoyed it. I think I binged it rather quickly as well. That's about it, and it's very, very quick to read. It's much shorter, I think, than Evelyn Hugo, and it's very similar in some senses to it. So I think if you if you liked Evelyn Hugo, you might like Daisy Jones. Evelyn Hugo was a bit more my favorite because it much more revolved around family, I felt. But you still have that sort of glimpse in, there is a family element in one of the band members. Yes, so that's about it. I actually enjoyed it. Next book what I read was Circe. It's a retelling of a mythological, Greek mythology, and it talks about Circe from sort of beginning. So from where she lived, like, let's say underground, underworld, whatever world we lived in, with her parents and whatever, and because we were part of Titans, how we viewed Olympians and so on. And then she kind of wanted to discover world and whatsoever. Then she found that she has these powers. So it's sort of like witch-like powers. I realize that I'm starting to spoil things for you. So it's about the story about, again, woman who wasn't appreciated, and she, even though being a goddess, and we see that sort of friction all the time, that she's like, some people view her as a goddess, some don't. She has these very big powers, but we not necessarily appreciate it, whereas like male gods dominance over female goddesses, and she's not really she's partially there with the nymphs, so not really looked at like at a goddess. Then she was, so there's more than a half of a book before she even gets onto the island where she was banished, and where she meets Odyssey. I loved it very much, but storytelling was so beautiful, even though it feels like not much happens in that beginning, and it's mostly like dynamics, let's say. I felt like it was so beautifully written where I didn't mind. And yes, and in comparison to Mistborn, I really felt like I might be a person who relates to character-driven stories better than the plot-driven stories. Anyway, I think that's pretty much sums it up, and it's really beautiful book, and it got me in a new trend of these Greek story retellings, and that's why I chose Ithaca for my Patreon as an book of June. And here we are, and I think it's really, like, it feels really wonderful, and this is one of the best books I read in this time. Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. It's basically a story about this house that was sort of gone through families, and that it was haunted, and it's basically about this Hilda who has been trained to keep such houses, let's say, that has magical significance. But it says just Hilda Larkin of the Boston for the keeping of enchanted rooms has been trained in taming such structures in order to preserve a historical and magical significance. She understands the dangers of bespelled homes given to tantrums. She advises that it is in Mary's best interest to make Wimble House their ally. To do that, she needs to move in too. So basically, she moves in to sort of investigate that house and maybe understand it. And at first it tries to scare her off or something, and it's very, like, I was hooked in from the first pages, in the sense when she meets the house. I kind of lost a little bit of the story once she got closer to discovering who exactly it is. I think it's like a wizard child or something like that. I don't know. But basically I started getting lost a little bit there. Again, I think it's partially me. Second thing is because there's more to this exist. This is just the book one. But I think it's sounded how it was written, and like how I started reading it, I kind of liked it. So like if you're looking something, I feel like it sort of was a little bit like an older middle grade even. So if you're looking for something like that, here you go. Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. So I thought it's very interesting of like, oh, I'm not even reacting to this house nonsense that is like whatever creepy things happening, because you're doing this. I'm seeing, this is not my first rodeo pretty much. I love that character, like how it started like that. and like being faced by this like haunted house, let's say. So really love that part. Anyway, so that's that. Now, books that I not enjoy that much, there's gonna be quite a few of them. Cursed Cocktails, and The Book Shop and The Barbarian. I want to speak about them both, even though we two different writers, right? But I want to speak about them because I think I picked them up because of Legends and Lattes. Legends and Lattes having a second book released about bookshops. It's not coming out yet, but you know, we at least know it is at some point. But basically what it is, cozy fantasy. It started like an entire new trend of cozy fantasy, like an entire new genre. And now we have all these other books pop up. And I think Cursed Cocktails annotated, I'm not sure, maybe the other one, but annotated to the Legends of Lattes. It said this book wouldn't have existed if not Legends of Lattes. It literally opened a new world. So this is about like a cleric or mage, I don't remember now, who decided to open a bar and had like a relic book of recipes. It was much more drama. It wasn't as relaxed as I hoped. It was suddenly poison started to come in later in the book, so like it's a bit more dramatic than I wanted. What it does very well is though Legends and Lattes is much better at that business sort of model and like building latte business, but so much better than this. However, this one actually has alcohol drink recipes in it, like, and I was like, that's interesting. It really brings you closer to that sort of premise. I think it really works well. So this is one of them I didn't quite enjoy, same as Legends of Lattes, and I don't think it's nearly as close in the terms how it's written, but I just wanted to share that there are more books in our world now. Next one, The Bookshop and the Barbarian. First of all, very short book, I remember that. Again, didn't get quite into it. Again, didn't feel like it was as cozy. And I think, in comparison to the restaurant and latte things, books are harder to write. So I'm gonna really, like, Bookshop felt harder to write. So I'm really gonna look forward to see what the authors of Legends and Lattes putting into that table, because I felt like it was much harder to get into it in a sense. So anyway, it's quite short, so if you do want to pick up The Bookshop and the Barbarian, I'm not quite a big fan of it. Don't even remember what kept me away from it. I didn't even put it in my list to see. So here we are. Next one, The Mermaid of Black Conch. This one I picked up because it was a mystery book. And I'm like, fine, it fits mermaid. And I'm gonna, like, mermaid is like a challenge that illustrators do on May. They draw a mermaid or something ocean-based every day in the May. But here we go. This, especially like it's in the word book, I was hoping so much from it. It's written intentionally in this broken English, and I couldn't get through it. It was really like, for me, it was about a mermaid who was caught by fishermen. It was about her suffering being caught, and then she was, I think one of the men like released her from being like almost tortured, exposed somewhere, and you know, like a zoo animal almost, let's say. So I think he saved her from that misery, but she was still miserable. It's not my style at all. Like I couldn't like get into it. It was it had areas where it was very graphic as well, and it just didn't land with me. But most of the things, it was that narrative that was quite a broken English and all, and I know it was intentional, but it just didn't get to me at all. I didn't like it. Wolf Song by T.J. Klune. It's I got into the high of T.J. Klune from House of the Cerulean Sea and Under the Whispering Door. This feels like a little bit of different genre. It doesn't have exactly same charms for me. It's more teenagey, and despite the thickness of it, it is more teenagey. It follows this teenager who basically gets almost like adopted. Let's say gets adopted by the link more than anything. He doesn't get adopted, but he basically like starts sad and alone and finds this group of friends, and he says he's their pack in their pack now, and then we develop so that we find there are witches and werewolves. Anyway, so that's basically the story. Now we are having some enemies and disputes and alphas and betas and omegas going on. So it felt a bit more like that urban fantasy that often gets into more fan fiction style. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to get out of that predisposition where we have like about werewolf fiction, let's say. So I felt like it's kind of felt there, and it was definitely a young adult book, and it didn't quite land. Like I really liked this man, or House of Cerulean Sea, a businessman, right? It felt more like an adult or a middle grade. This one is more young adult, and more so, I think there's another second book, Raven's Home or something like that. More so it's a series, so obviously it's gonna be different. And again, we still have queer relationships in this, and as you know, we've often like werewolf stories with this mate sort of trope, and there's definitely one in here. So I'm not really big into this story particularly. I still felt like I much more prefer DJ Kloon's writing style in comparison to some other writers. So like, just for his style, he's definitely, I finished the book basically. So just for his style, he got me in more than anything. But it's again not my type of book. The beginning of it, quite up to like first third, before we found about werewolves and witches, feels more like a slice of life and teenager navigating life, which is fine. After that, we also have a bit more pack wars, let's say. But here we are. I think if you're a bit more into young adult fantasy and you're looking for something, DJ Kloon is an option. The last book is the book of the month for May. And it was, I did it as an audiobook again. It was Sandman, narrated by Neil Gaiman and a group of people. And it was book one only, but basically I did it after I watched Netflix show. So I think it was much more graphic than the show itself. So it didn't quite land with me for like amount of being graphic and almost grotesque. And it's one of the most graphic books of Neil Gaiman. But I think you can tell if you read Sandman comic before as well. And I feel like he probably grew out of it as he was growing. But I was really like thinking what's wrong with him, what's in his mind really as a writer. He was very twisted. So there are obviously differences from TV show, comic, and the book. Comic, for example, for me, graphic novel felt a bit more fragmented, as I remember, but again, I didn't quite finish it. Book and TV show now, TV show has gender flip on Lucifer and like Joanna, Constantine, and so on. So there are some differences and characters feel different. There are more DC elements in the book as well. Just wanted to mention it. It's very well narrated. It has sound effects, but I'm just simply not gonna continue with it. But basically, if you haven't seen series, book, or whatever, I'll just tell you it's about Sandman, who is the god of dreams, being like not necessarily god. He like, I forgot how the eternal, somewhat. He's basically being captured by humans and held for a century in captive, and then he breaks free and looks for his possessions. So that's really the start of it, the premise. So that's about it, really. That's a wrap-up of my books I read in April to May, and I think these are becoming more rare for me, so we're doing wrap-up every couple months now, so we're probably gonna only be talking about more books in a few more months. But thank you for joining, and tell me what you had in your favorites. And yeah, I hope you find something from here that you might pick up, because there's definitely some choices that I could recommend. So here we are. Thank you for being here. Bye.